This is the Stanley 79 side rabbet plane, and it is seriously cool. Let's take a closer look. The Stanley 79 is a weird one in that the cutting edge is actually on the side of the plane, not the bottom. And it's an interesting one. Let's take it apart. Normally the fence would determine how far into the board it would cut, but in this case it determines how deep down does it cut. There are also two noses on here that you can adjust up and down, though most of the time you keep them flush to the sole down here because the cutting surface is here. This is actually the sole of the plane that is riding on the wood. When we flip it over here, you can see the blades kind of come in at an odd angle here. We can loosen this up, pull both of these out, and you can see here is the iron. It is a little bit more difficult to cut. It's a little more difficult to sharpen, though usually freehand it's not that hard. Usually I just do it freehand. I lay them face down, feel that bevel, and then slide it back and forth. I'll have my finger back here actually as a rest, kind of as a guide for the honing. Looking at the scratch pattern, got a little bit of a burr, move over to the next one. Because they're small, they don't take much at all. And just like that, we can lay it over, flip that burr, and then give it a little bit of a strop work. Yeah, that's happy. That's what I want right there. Then I can bring it back over here and set it down, and I'm going to push it in until it's just touching the wood. I don't want it to be actually cutting yet, I just want it to be touching. Then we can carefully reassemble it. And I want to crank this down with a screwdriver as well. Now the iron is just barely sticking out there. That's what we're looking for. But what exactly is a side rabbet used for? Imagine you have a dado and a board. You're going to put a shelf into that and you want to house it in. But your shelf is a little thicker than that. And unfortunately, you don't have a blade that's the exact same width as your shelf. Now, you could go plane your shelf down until it's the right thickness, but you already finished it. With a side rabbet plane, I can put it down in here, and I can adjust the fence so that I'm going down to the right depth. And now what I can do is I can make that groove slightly wider. Come back over here, set it on, and then run right down the board. And I'll get these really nice, fine shavings that come out here. I just took a little bit off, just a tiny bit off of there. And I can keep going at it until I get it down to the exact width I want it to be and the shelf slides in. Usually the problem is your combination plane has a set of irons. And unfortunately, that exact thickness you want to fit that board in there isn't quite there. There's one that's a little bigger, there's one that's a little smaller. What you can do is pick the one that's a little smaller, and then you can detail it down to be exactly the size you want. Also really useful if you have electric routers and you're routing out a groove or a dado. You can use this to widen it just a little bit. Now, what most people end up doing is they pick the bit they want, and then they plane their board down until it fits that groove. So most people will cut the groove first and then make the drawer second. And sometimes that works, but not always. Sometimes the board is what the board is and I need to get a groove that matches it. This is really nice because I can make a groove or a dado just a little wider. It's nice to have the ability to kind of sneak up on the fit and get it precisely where you want it without too much work. I don't use this very often. It only comes out once, maybe twice a year. So it's not a tool you really need to run out and get. But it is a fun tool. And when you have it, options just become a little more available. And they're not that expensive in comparison to a lot of the other tools. Stanley also made the 99 and the 98, which basically took this and broke it in half and put a little more comfortable handle on it. And so you have one blade for going one direction, one blade going the other direction, just in two different pieces. Except for most of the time you end up buying one or the other. It's very rare to find a set. Whereas with one of these, now I can go both ways because I have two different irons. So if the grain is running one direction, then I just turn around and I go the other direction. Kind of nice to be able to run both ways. Now, I do have to say, this is a little bit finicky. It's something that takes a little bit of dialing in to get it right where you want, and it's not quite comfortable, and sometimes it's just kind of a little issue. But I wanted to show it on some white oak because it can do the end grain white oak. Most of the time you're doing a groove with the grain, and then it's relatively easy. But if you're doing dados across the grain, that means you're gonna have to cut end grain, and so it can be a little bit finicky. But if you're willing to spend a little bit of time on it, it can be a lot of fun because there are few things as enjoyable as those end grain shavings that came out of the middle of a dado, and it's just happy when it works, and when it doesn't work, it's not happy. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt, and it might be for you. So I hope you like this. It's a really fun, simple tool that is honestly enjoyable to use when it works, and honestly not enjoyable when it doesn't. But as long as it's sharp, then it actually works out pretty well most of the time. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, or would like to see the other ones in the future, there are several other versions of this, such as the 98 and 99. Maybe someday I'll get some of those and be able to show them off. But until then, your rabbets can be on their side, as long as you have a side rabbet plane. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, throw those down below. I'll do read through them, and it really helps out the channel. Thank you for that. You know all that because I say it every time. But I'm going to say it again. Thank you. If you really want to be good, though, you know about these people over here. They are the famous, wonderful, and benevolent people over on Patreon. Because between patrons and members, those are the people who've clicked the join button and actually become basically a Patreon through YouTube here. Between you guys and the thank you button down there, you support this channel. You are the ones that allow me to go out and buy tools like this and talk about what I want to talk about. Thank you for that. It means more than I can say. If you want to help us out, think about becoming a patron or a member. That means wonderful things. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. One of the really interesting facts about these is this is called a side rabbet plane because it says made in USA. If it said made in England, then it would be a side rebate plane.